Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm your boy Sap. That's Rob. We're so excited to have you with us today, and this is going to be our best episode ever. Rob, tell everyone what to expect.
That's a big claim right out the gate there, Brian. But wow, what a day! Just to kind of give everyone a little peek into my world, I, for the first time in my life, I think, managed to avoid social media because I couldn't watch the race live this morning because I was playing soccer football. And I scored a stunning 30-yard chip of the goalkeeper, by the way. But anyway, enough about that. I had to get back, avoid my phone. I saw about like a million texts from you, which I just had to ignore completely as well. Get home with all intentions of watching the race on repeat, and then I remembered it was the final day of the English Premier League in soccer, so I had to watch that first, which even more raised the stakes of trying to avoid the race. But I did it. I actually sat and watched the race without knowing what the hell was going on. So we are going to get to that. We're going to do news and social. We're going to review what was a cracking Spanish Grand Prix.
Yeah, I'm happy you agree. Amazing race.
Tinged with a little bit of bitterness, which I think we both agree on as well.
Yeah, we do.
Which we'll get to later. And we don't even get a chance to draw breath and think about what we're going to plan for next week's episode because we go back to Monaco. So we'll do a Monaco preview. And if that wasn't enough, Brian probably gets to break the news that he kicked my ass in fantasy. And if that wasn't enough, we've got Pit Lane Pull. And we've got 100 seconds of DRS. So, we're probably going to have to get on with it, Brian.
We should, and I hear, your goal, congratulations. I can only assume the other goalie was still in the washroom coming out of halftime, and I'm happy you had fun doing all your soccer stuff.
Don't even try to talk soccer. I won't try and talk basketball to you.
I'm not. I'm just going to say on the other hand, got to watch about 48 different dance numbers, all my daughter's dance recitals today, so I am excited to be back talking about Formula One. Man, this was awesome. So first off, I got to say something. As we get into the week that was before the race weekend started, upgrades. And we're going to get into the specifics here in a second. Rob will get us through a couple of them. And it was exciting. You just didn't know what was coming. And the thing that really got me, though, is every day of practice, Rob kept sending me notes. Did you watch FP1? I'm like, no. He goes, did you watch FP2? I'm like, no, at work. And then Saturday, did you watch FP3? I'm like, what? No. And so eventually I felt like Allen Iverson.
But we talking about practice, man. What are we talking about? Practice?
Practice?
We're talking about practice, man. We're talking about practice. We're talking about practice. We ain't talking about the game.
The race.
We're talking about practice, man.
We're talking about practice. That's what you kept asking me about practice. The whole world was so geeked up for practice. Who cares? It's not the race.
I just think there's a little bit of bitterness there that you just got yourself caught in meetings you couldn't get out of and you couldn't watch any of practice. That's what it really comes down to. Because normally it's you asking me, did you watch practice? So
all right, maybe.
I got your number, Brian.
Yeah, you do. Totally do. But, I mean, so, Rob, we were talking about this all week, and obviously during practice, as Allen Iverson would say. But, talk a little bit about the teams that brought upgrades and maybe some that didn't.
Yeah, I mean, teams that didn't is the first thing that caught my eye because amidst all the kind of upgrade fest that was going on, Haas said they weren't bringing anything to Spain because they felt that they still had enough performance in the car. And I wrote in the notes on here, which is quite funny because I'm looking at it now, by the time we're on air and we talk about this, we'll know if that was a good idea or not. Well, we'll get to that in a little while, I guess. Alpine were bringing a new rear wing. Ferrari were bringing a number of, well, they weren't really very explicit on what they were bringing, but there were important upgrades that were coming. But yeah, and Mercedes as well were promising big upgrades as well. And I think we just have to hold all of that, keep our powder dry, and talk about that in the actual race review, I guess, because
there's one that I want to make sure we do talk about.
Go on, okay.
The Aston Martin.
Green Bull.
The Green Bull. So just for everyone's, I love nicknames. Like they just grab me and pull me in, especially good ones. And 2 years ago, before Aston Martin was Aston Martin, who were they, Rob? What was the name of the team?
I don't remember.
You don't remember Racing Point? Okay. So Racing Point...
Racing Point with the pink... Yeah, okay, go on.
So Racing Point was the pink Mercedes in, what was it, 2019?
Yeah,
maybe it's 2020.
they were accused of copying all of Mercedes' designs, right?
But
the pink
their
livery.
nickname, at least their social media nickname that I fell in love with, was Tracing Point. And so Lawrence Stroll, the owner of Tracing Point, now Aston Martin, brought that tracing paper back out again, took his Mercedes engine and plopped it in what was basically a green Red Bull, a green bull. And it didn't work. We're going to get into it, but boy, it didn't work at all. It's like someone gave him all of the ingredients and the recipe, and they took all of this amazing food and they just shoved it in a microwave. And they took it out and go, it didn't work. Yeah, it did not work. It was so bad.
In fact, I thought, so one of my favorite films growing up as a kid was Superman 3, okay? So it's when Clark Kent fights Superman in the junkyard, if you kind of remember that iconic scene. And the reason he ends up fighting him is because, I think the guy's name was Gus. He got a block of kryptonite and had it analysed in a lab, and it came back as 97% analysed, and there was 3% unknown. So he looked at the back of a packet of cigarettes that he was smoking and just said, tar, let's make the last 3% tar. And that just meant the kryptonite wasn't really kryptonite. So it didn't kill Superman, it just made him evil and get that epic fight in the junkyard. And that's what I feel happened to Aston Martin. I think they had 97% of Red Bull's secret sauce, and they didn't have the last piece, and Stroll's just kind of gone, extra wing. Just throw out an extra wing. What could possibly go wrong? Because as we get into the race, for all the people that were looking for a story to really beat up on Aston and look for this big conspiracy theory, I think those folk wanted Aston to have an absolutely fantastic race so they could go, see, they've cheated, they've copied. But when we get to the race review, we'll see that story has pretty much died a death, I would say.
Oh, God. Yeah, they were... It looks really pretty. The color, the livery, it's always been great. You know I love that car. It looks even better now, running kind of the Red Bull side pods and the way they have it structured in the same floor that we can see. But it's still a trash can. And they still got Lance and Seb going out there doing battle with something that just ain't working. But a couple other notes outside of upgrades and practice. Two things I thought of note this week. One in particular was, we love doing social updates. There was two that we saw that crossed our minds. One, Charles Leclerc in Monaco in a historic race, historic cars, crashed Niki Lauda's car. And as soon as I saw this, I immediately put it out on Twitter and I said, oh, Charles, bad luck back again in Monaco. But then it actually showed that he had a brake problem. The brakes failed, effectively, and he put the pedal all the way to the floor, which has actually happened to me once in an old car. I won't get into too much about it. It is scary, and he did have to stuff the rear of it into the wall, and it was just sad to see him driving back to the pits with the wing flapping and hanging on the ground, basically, and the whole back end was just a mess. And the second thing was...
Sorry, 1 second before you move on.
Yeah.
How good was the photography on the picture that shows the brake disc just basically committing suicide and jumping off the wheel and just kind of fragmenting and coming out? Because when that picture came out and they were like, yep, nothing to do with Leclerc, that brake disc said, good night, Vienna. And just
there has to be sort of proof nowadays, right? Because we'll get into the race, but when Carlos had a little boo-boo in the race, everyone blamed it on Carlos. Then when Max had one, everyone said, Carlos is off the hook, which pissed me off because I'm a Carlos guy, but that's okay. And then there was a great video. It was actually on the Formula One channel, but it was a Haas racing video where K-Mag and Schumacher went into the Stewart Haas NASCAR and drove around. It was so cool. I really had fun watching it. I thought that was actually fun to watch, the F1 guys in a NASCAR. Every time they said grip on the banking, you had to take a drink. And I was ripped by the end of that video. Just ripped. And then there was some horrible background music, like a banjo and thing going, and it just went the whole video, and I wanted to vomit. But it was fun to watch. And then there was like a little extra sort of appendix to the whole thing. It was Gunter getting in there with Kevin. Yeah. And I thought, it was only 2.5 or 3 minutes, and I thought, this is it. this is what they saved to the end. It's just going to be a bunch of expletives they have to beep out. It's just going to be tremendous and fantastic. And it was the most boring 2.5 minutes I've ever seen Gunter in. I mean, I was like so bummed. It had such potential.
I know. I would rather have seen him sitting in front of his boat for 2 minutes than.
Yeah. So anyway, if you haven't seen those videos, check them out. They came out on our Twitter, but it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, and just to kind of tie off some of the other pieces of news that were flying around, we spoke last week about Alonso not being happy about the penalty he'd got in Miami for not giving enough time back, even though he thought he had given enough time back when he'd cut the chicane. So it rumbled on this week, and they kind of interviewed him on it, and he came out and called the FIA incompetent, which is always a way to endear yourself to the governing body.
I love that he did that.
And it kind of, you had to kind of see the interview, but it didn't feel like it was going to go that way. I thought he was just going to kind of like fob it off like they often do and kind of like downplay it. And he's like, yeah, it's incompetence.
Well, I mean, he's a world champion playing with house money, right? What are they going to do?
Yeah,
exactly. At this point, he's going to tell it like it is. And then, we're going to talk a lot about Checo today, but the news before the race, he had a boy. Yeah, Emilio. So exciting. They tweeted out the video. So excited for him and the family. I can only assume that when his wife was pregnant, they told her to team orders, made sure that he could be in the car. I don't even know what the analog would be there, the analogy, but boy, we'll talk about Checo.
That would only work, I think, if she was having twins and they gave orders to which one was supposed to come out first. But,
right. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. You're going to have to hold on to that baby because Max's girlfriend is going shopping tomorrow, and that's more important because cameras are going, so you're going to have to wait behind Max. I mean, what? Good, 6th race of the year.
We'll get there. Keep your powder dry here, Brian. And I think last but not least was that they announced that Russian Grand Prix won't get replaced. So the OCD element of me is quite happy because 22 feels like a nice even number. I wasn't happy with 23 anyway. So now that Russia got cancelled, they're not going to replace it with another race. So we're going to have a nice round 22. It just feels, I don't know.
Well, 22 and 22 has a nice ring to it. Although, just for the nerds out there, you can't really call the summer break or winter break if you're on the other hemispheres. You can't call it the halfway point because it's 13 and then 9. 13 up to and including Hungary, and then mostly the month of August off, and then 9 to close. So just manage your fantasy teams, your weekends, and your F1 addiction accordingly.
So then Spain finally rumbled round with practice, which apparently Brian saw none of.
Practice? We talk about practice.
And in FP1 we saw the bizarre... Well, it's not bizarre because it was planned. It was always going to happen. It was just a bit strange seeing some of those driver switch-outs for giving some of the... Well, I was going to say giving some of the younger drivers the chance to get some practice, but
then Kubica was there.
Again, Kubica's in there as well.
Kubica's older than us.
Yeah, I know.
Young drivers. Kubica is celebrating his 50th birthday. I mean, I don't understand why he would... I mean, I know he had an amazing career going, right? And had he not had that rally accident, he would have been in a Ferrari, and he would have had an entirely different career trajectory. And it is a great what if. But there's so much young talent. I can't believe... I mean, I'm just very confused that someone would say he's our next reserve driver. What? Like... I just don't get it. And the thing I would say that kind of shocked me was Williams. So Nick DeVries gets the drive. I thought I'd read it was going to be in Latifi's car, but then it was in Albano's car. And by the way, we'll get to Albon in this race. Boy, he's got to stop with the hair dye. It did not work. And so, I mean, seriously, they make the... Anyway, we'll get there. And so, they put DeVries in Albon's car, and he actually goes out and is ahead of Latifi on the timing charts for most of FP1. And so then in the race today, I don't know if you caught it, but I think it was Ted Kravitz actually referenced the fact that Latifi's under heat. And there's even rumors, and it's a rumor. So for us to spread a rumor is a little disgusting, but it was shocking to me that it made it on the air, that Latifi could be a mid-season... he could lose his drive mid-season. It would be Nick DeVries possibly taking that spot. So I was shocked.
But come on. If Latifi lost his drive mid-season, that will be less shocking than one of the Scooby-Doo reveals when it's the old guy, the old grumpy guy from the hotel that is trying to run the new company out of town. I mean, it's just...
Yeah,
it's
I know.
just... I mean...
But he's a pay driver, and like
Yeah, I know, but there's only so much. I do think while there's an argument for paid drivers and they'll get to keep their seat because of the money they're bringing, I don't know what the money delta is, but how many championship points do you think you'd need to earn to be worth more to a team than a paid driver?
I mean, but they have 3. So it's, I mean, I mean, they're not going to catch McLaren with their 3.
But don't you get paid? Isn't there actually a sliding scale
Yes.
on the number of points you score as well, right?
By place, for sure.
Is it just by place or is it by points? Okay, I'm sure somebody out there on Twitterland will let us know. But
yeah, at F1 Dirty Side.
I just feel that that wouldn't be a big shock if it happened. So, but I mean, the main thing that, other than the kind of the driver swap outs, the one note that I wrote to myself during the practice that I was watching that Brian wasn't, was Mercedes. And I wrote, is this Miami all over again, or are they actually starting to come back? Because we'd seen them have great pace in Miami, but actually it wasn't. It was just they were probably going as fast as they could in practice, and everyone else was kind of had their feet up and smoking a cigar and just kind of like taking in the sights. Once real pace came out in quali, Mercedes fell behind. But I know this sounds like Monday morning quarterbacking now, but it felt different. It felt different in practice. Mercedes looked a little bit more hooked into the road. Looked like that car was actually on rails a little bit more. So quali came around, and it actually panned out that way, that Mercedes didn't look like a pile of junk. And they actually flew through in Q1. I mean, Q1, I was a little bit disappointed for Fernando. I don't think there was many surprises, to be honest, that much in the 5 that were out. But I think Fernando was one of the last ones. He was like in the danger zone until like the last, whoever else it was who went round, just bumped him out. And I'm like, oh, dude, it's your home race. It would have been nice for Fernando to have gone through, I think.
I agree. I was really hoping, and he's had some serious pace in that car throughout different points of the season. And I was really hoping it was going to happen there. But we lost in Q1, we lost both Williams, both Aston Martins, and as you said, Fernando. The interesting part is his Alpine teammate, Esteban, was 15th. So, I mean, they were basically, you had 3 teams at the bottom in Q1. And then Q2 comes, and Mercedes quickly goes out, drops a couple in the 119s. Holy cow. Then they didn't even come back out. I loved it. They dropped the mic, and we're like, yeah, good enough. We're done with the session here. We'll just wait for Q3.
It's better than drop the mic, and it's only for maybe the older generation that will get this, but that was true Hannibal from the A-Team just cracking a cigar and sitting in the back of the garage, right? Because they knew
love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what that was. You got to say it, man. You got to bring it home.
I was just leaving it for you, Brian.
I appreciate that. So then we lost the Alpha Tauris, and I'm going to have a little Pierre Gasly note here when we get into the race. I don't know what's happening. It's really bumming me out. But we lost Esteban, the Alpha Tauris, Zhou Guanyu, and then in what was epic, Lando gets into Q3 and eliminates Mick. But about 35 seconds later, he gets flagged, Lando does, for track limits. His lap is deleted. He falls into the elimination zone in Q2, doesn't make it to Q3, and Mick goes through. And it's the first Q3 for Mick's career. And I know that wherever you were in Connecticut on Saturday morning watching this, you had the biggest smile on your face. You're the biggest Mick Schumacher homer I've ever seen. And I like Mick. But you put me to shame. I mean, so you must have. I'm assuming you were running around in front of your house, waving your Mick Schumacher flag, just screaming and chanting.
I mean, probably all of that minus the flag. I've got to let you down there and realise that I don't have a flag. But no, I was so hoping Mick was going to make it to Q3. And when he was in there, and then I saw Lando come round and the timing board updated, and it kind of like dunk. Puts him down into the elimination zone. I was like, oh man, how much more have you got to do to get yourself into Q3? And when they showed the replay of Lando, I mean, wow. I mean, that had to be millimeters. I mean, I don't think they got it wrong. He was fully over the track limits, which by the law is deletion of time. But wow. I mean, that is about as close as you can get to being in track limits to not being in track limits.
It is, and to being in Q3 and not. And what was interesting to me is as all the dirty siders know, Rob and I try to play the tracks on Formula One game before the week of, and I really struggle with that chicane at the end, right before the general curve to the pit straight and the start finish line. So I'm watching these drivers kind of bounce off, one of the big curb and then fly to the other one that's the long one and push them back onto the track. And I in my addled mind, early on a Saturday morning, decided to name that. And the name I gave it is Sausage Curva Grande. Just like Curva Grande, Monza, but this is Sausage Curva Grande. Yes? No? That's
no. I think the phrase is "don't give up your day job." I think that's yeah.
This is my day job.
You wish.
I wish. And then we went to Q3, and really just let's do it quick because I want to get to the race. Charles had a big spin, and I'm watching this thinking, no, I can hear him in the car once again, kind of doing the old.
I am stupid.
Just I know he's beating himself up. Max goes with a monster lap. We barely talked about it at the low end of the 119s. And it just looked like the writing was on the wall. This isn't Charles' day. And then out of nowhere, with one lap to go before the checkered flag, all the pressure in the world, Charles Leclerc goes out and puts a 118.75, a perfect lap, chef's kiss. He drops the mic and says, "I'll take pole position. Thank you very much." Walks out of there. It was amazing. That was, in my mind, the best non-race lap we may see the whole year with the pressure that was on him at the end of Q3. Otherwise, he's 10th.
Yeah.
And so he goes from 10th place to first on the grid in what we thought was going to be a bit of a processional race. It wasn't at all. But that's kind of what we expected. And I thought this was going to be, the death knell for his race. Turns out the power unit would take care of that later. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that made it for me was that whole no previous lap time set. So you're going out now, and you kind of could have forgiven him for putting in a bit of a banker, just get himself on maybe the second row.
Right.
Because he knows he's got the pace in the car if he doesn't really push it too much. But, oh my gosh, he pushed it through every corner, including the one that he lost it on when he set no time. And wow, yeah, what a lap. I mean, it was phenomenal.
So we got to start the race, but I just want to mention this real quick. At the end of quali, I always like to look at the teammates and the deltas between teammates. And there was one large one in this one, just in terms of starting place, not in terms of making it to Q2 or 3. And it's Valtteri and Zhou. And so Valtteri, who, by the way, it turns out the butt shot in Aspen, remember the Aspen picture in the river with his ass hanging out?
I've tried to delete it from my mind, but thanks for bringing it up again.
Anytime. That was for charity. So he sold those things and raised $50,000 for charity. So kudos.
I didn't know you had $50,000 to spend on art, Brian.
Well, there were two of them sold. One was to you for $5, and the other $49,995 was to me. Thank God I put it on an IOU. And so he raised money for charity. But Valtteri, who had another amazing weekend and another amazing race, started 7th on the grid, and Zhou Guanyu was 15th. And I know Zhou's a rookie, so I kind of discount that delta at this point. You got to get your feet under in Formula One, and he's had some good returns early. But that was noticeable to me, teammate to teammate. But Rob, then the race started. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I was not really watching it in real time, but it felt like it was in real time. Thought Charles got a really good drive off the line, but I thought he'd gone way too wide. I mean, shows what I know. Shows how I would be a terrible F1 driver. But he kind of went way over to the right. I'm thinking, well, he's completely left the door open for Max here. But as it turned out, no, perfect, into the first corner. And I thought, well, that's it now, because Spain's a procession and Charles is through the first corner, and that'll be that. And, oh, my God, how wrong we were. But, yeah, not really much happened to that first corner. The main thing of note was, what was it? 2 or 3 corners in, I think K-Mag and Hamilton came together, which... I don't think... I was looking at Twitter then, and there was a lot of hate for Lewis on that he understeered into K-Mag.
No.
And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. if you're saying that Lewis understeered into K-Mag, what you're acknowledging is he had understeer. So he wasn't in... So he understeered...
But he didn't.
I mean, K-Mag was ahead of... Well, they were side-by-side. It's a racing incident, in my view. I mean, should K-Mag have been where he was? Yeah, he had the right to be where he was. Was Lewis in the right place? Yeah. And they came together. Big wow. Happens every week. Move on. Just don't look for some kind of, like, subplot that Lewis took out K-Mag. I'm like, what? Lewis thinks that K-Mag is his number one rival now and he must destroy him at all costs? I mean, it's not He-Man and Skeletor. I mean, come on.
We have some loyal listeners who I like very much and I think very highly of, but a couple of them in particular are very anti-Team LH, and they were on Twitter today talking how it was Lewis's fault. I would argue, politely and respectfully, I think it was 60% K-Mag, 40% Lewis, and here's why. In between shows 2 and 3 this afternoon at the dance hall in Skokie, Illinois, I sat when my daughters were changing and my wife was helping them. I sat by myself and I watched over and over again. It was onboards of both K-Mag and Lewis, and they were on top of each other. Did I watch it probably 10 times? At least. And I watched Lewis's wheel, okay, like his steering wheel and the inputs he gave to it. At no point did he start to ease his turn or even any kind of towards center. It was constantly to the right. He was constantly trying to move that car to the right into the corner. And K-Mag, if you look at him, he is aggressively moving into the corner, into the same kind of space Lewis is at. And you can see him turning harder to the right. So I 100% think it's a racing incident. I'm happy there were no penalties. There was no big-time steward review. But to me, if you had to assign any kind of blame, I'd give a little more to K-Mag because I think he moved over into Lewis. And I would appreciate if they wouldn't do that again because Kevin was on my fantasy team and I had 20 crisp American dollars sitting on Lewis because he was a 40-1 long shot and I took it. And I lost everything right there. Hosed me up. Yeah.
So other than you having a disaster in the first few laps, it was interesting to watch then things pan out, because at this point I'm thinking, okay, we made a big deal last week about going big on the science behind fast corners leading into the DRS zone, which in the past, because that fast corner throws off a lot of dirty air, it means the cars behind understeer, so they have to slow down to be able to make the corner, which means they're not close enough in DRS, which is kind of what leads to the whole procession. That didn't happen here today, Brian. The DRS was actually useful. And I think, if anybody wanted to kind of use a use case of are the new regulations allowing cars to follow a little bit closer to be able to maximize things, I think today was Exhibit A, Your Honor, because I loved it. I loved the fact that they could follow closer through those two fast corners into the DRS zones. And I know we're going to, as we get later on into the race, we'll talk about some of these, but it was obvious right from the beginning. Right as soon as DRS was enabled, you could just see that cars were visibly closer coming into the DRS zone than we've ever seen them before.
I loved it. I loved coming even out of the chicane there, the sausage curb grande.
That's
and
not
then
catching on.
It's gonna stick. And then the gentle sweeper before the home pitch straight. Loved it. I loved the power of the DRS. I love the fact that there were a lot of overtakes, and I know most of them were in the DRS zone, so people may complain that it was kind of fueled by the wing being open. However, there were some that weren't, and some of the ones that weren't in the DRS zones were the best ones, and we'll get into more of those.
Yeah.
But I got to give...
But 1 second on that.
Yeah.
Spain gets a hard time because even with DRS, we never see any DRS.
It's always been boring.
Right?
I know.
So I thought the fact that they could get closer and even be challenging alongside in the DRS zone was just a breath of fresh air. Like Spain, went from being this, you can't call it Monaco procession.
No.
But it basically is a boring race. Other than that first dive down into the first corner, if you don't do anything in the first corner, you have to go all the way around again, and then you get another chance at the first corner. And that was the polar opposite today. I thoroughly enjoyed it today.
I did too. Totally different track layout, but in years past, it's had an Aussie GP feel to me, where it's hard to overtake because of width or track layout or whatever. I loved the race today. I loved the overtakes. And I would actually say it was fun watching people play defense. George Russell, shout out. He's trying to become the next Minister of Defense. He's trying to take Fernando's crown. Man, and I would actually agree with Brundle. There were a couple of them where he kind of shot it to the right and then right before the braking, brought it back to the left and closed the door. And it was getting pretty close to A, being a double move, and B, being under braking, but neither of which you can do. So I loved watching it, though. And the defense he played on Max when Max did or didn't have DRS. We're about to get into that because it's coming up here in a second when he gets off the walls angry. But so I reference this. Lap 7, Carlos goes off into the gravel. They just show us the picture of a Ferrari in the gravel, and I'm like, what happened? And then they show us the replay, and it was like Charles in Quali, where it was a different corner, but kind of on your own, just lost the rear end. And I'm thinking, oh, Carlos, your home GP, you've had so many runs into gravel. He gets out at least, and I'm like, oh boy, and then you watch him tumble down. He's also on my fantasy team. We got him and Magnussen languishing at the back. I'm thinking, thanks for shafting me, guys, because of course everything happens just to me. And then 2 laps later, Max, first name, Emilian, second name, Verstappen, third name. That's really, they couldn't name him Maximilian, but anyway. He goes off into the gravel, and they show it, and it's basically the same thing. He just didn't do as much of a spin, got out a little faster, had less of a penalty because of it happening. And then it's, is there something on the track? Maybe someone dropped some oil. What happened here? And I don't like the fact that you kind of have to have someone else have it happen to him to realize that it's not Carlos's fault.
I'm kind of thinking that, in the 100 seconds of DRS, we sometimes ask if you could put a James Bond-style gadget on the car, what would you do? And, the other thing is that I've always been an advocate of having sprinkler systems to put the water on. I think somebody put an oil system on turn 4 because I've watched the replay of Carlo and Max going into that corner and nothing seems wrong. It doesn't seem like they overcook it. It's just out of nowhere the back end just lets go.
It was the wind. They said it was the wind.
Okay. I was watching on replay, so I was kind of fast-forwarding.
No, they said they blamed it on the wind. It had shifted behind them. And I'm thinking, how fast is this wind? Like hurricane strength? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, okay, but I mean, it just looked like out of nowhere, all of a sudden the back end just went, I've had enough. I'll see you later.
Agreed. And it wasn't even like they were coming off or onto the throttle. It was just as they're starting the turn. And at this point, though, Charles was on his own. Around lap 11, Charles Leclerc was out and was heading off into the sunset. And it was fun to watch, and we didn't even see him anymore. He entered the George Russell Witness Protection Program of F1 commentating. I didn't even know he was in the race. I just had to keep looking at the board to see the LEC. And then we saw Lando going up the standings. We found out afterwards he had tonsillitis. Some actual real questions being asked on Twitter. If he was that sick, should he have been racing? That's a real good question. I mean, in all seriousness, what's the point of having a reserve driver if your main driver is ill and can't go? I know he wants to go. He's going to always ask to go, but that's why the corner in boxing throws in the towel, not the boxer, because the boxer always wants to go back in. I don't know how sick he actually was, but it was fun watching Lando go up the standings, watching a McLaren do something for a change. It was great. And then Max Verstappen got so angry because his DRS was or wasn't working, and they kept telling him every time it worked and or didn't work, and he kept getting angrier. And he was driving angry, and he's behind George, and it looked like if you were in your mall parking lot, and a 1983 Toyota Tercel were going about 5 miles an hour, and there's a new Bentley behind it, and you can see him weaving back and forth, pounding on the steering wheel, just angry. That was Max Verstappen. He was in the radio angry. He was pissed that he was stuck behind George, that his DRS wasn't working. He was throwing a tantrum in that cockpit, and I like Max a lot. Dude has to calm down at times.
Yeah, I mean, that was great. I loved those two going head-to-head, and I'm not even sure if I'm even in the right spot in the race now, but when did Max take George around the outside on the fresher tyres?
I think it was lap 24.
Okay, so we're coming up. Oh, no, so we're about where we are now then. Yeah. So, and I know it was fresher tyres, but it was just like he was one of those kind of like Scale Electrics cars on those groove, he just went round the outside with like 1,000,000% grip. I was like, what's he doing? You can't go around the outside on this corner. No one ever goes around the outside on this corner. And he just kind of just like, I'm going to keep going, and I'm not going to... that was a phenomenal overtake. I've got to be honest. I know the tyre difference was there, but wow, you've still got to go and do it.
Well, Max had, I think, the best overtake of the race was on Valtteri. towards the end when
Yeah,
he
yeah,
went
yeah.
around the outside right before Sausage Curba Grande. He went around him. It was the turn before it. I'd never seen anyone. Even the announcers were shocked. But back to where we were. The first hint of an interesting race from Red Bull comes up when Checo asks for Max to move. Max at this point has the intermittent DRS. He is stuck behind George effectively, and Checo sneaks up right behind him, puts his nose in, and says, "Hey fellas, mind if I play through?" And Red Bull was like shocked by this. They had no answer. They were like, no, let's let Max work on it a little more. And then they pitted some people to get him out of the way. And it was crazy. It was like in 2 laps, we had Checo asking for Max to get out of the way. And then Charles, they show the car, him coasting. And the announcer's like, that's a slow-moving Ferrari. And the Ferrari power unit gave up the day. The turbo exploded or whatever ended up happening. The team radio, thank you, Lee, for sending that to me, makes it sound as though the turbo gave up on him. But, man, that was a blow. He was so far out ahead. And I know Red Bull then says, oh, we were going to find Charles anyway. No, you weren't.
No, you weren't. And it's, you start to worry. I know we're only a few races in, but you already start to worry that the biggest reason why Ferrari won't win this world championship is because of Ferrari. You can't be challenging for world titles and be having these silly little reliability issues in there. And it's not just them; it's other teams throughout the grid that have Ferrari engines kind of suffer from it as well. And it's
Zhou Guan Yu went out.
yeah, and it's just come on, guys, you can't be coasting to victory and then have things like this happen. But so that was kind of a bit gutting, and also personally because he's my turbo driver, so goodbye points.
Yeah, he was my turbo driver as well, so that was sad. At this point now, I got my whole team is in shambles. Just I got Carlos in the gravel, Charles is out, K-Mag popped some tires. I mean, I'm sitting there thinking I'm gonna be last, but alas, it was you who ended up last. And then Lance Stroll, he got spun around by Pierre Gasly right at this point. And I'd like to take 10 seconds here just to say what in the actual F is happening with Pierre Gasly this year. Last year, he took over this Mr. Saturday title, at least in my estimation, from George Russell. He qualified. It felt like he was starting 6th on the grid at almost every race. And coming into this year, you sort of expected him to be even better, as long as the AlphaTauri car gave him something. And he has been in no man's land. I think he outfinished Yuki once so far in races. Yuki had some DNFs, Pierre had a DNF. So they've only had 2 or 3 where they've both finished. But Yuki schooled him today. And I have a friend who was sending me a lot of texts, and he's newer to F1. And he says, I don't understand why people say Pierre is so much better than Yuki. Yuki's always doing better than him. And it's a good objective opinion. And if you look, it's not too far off from being right. And so my big question is, A, why is AlphaTauri so bad this year? Can't they just borrow the Red Bull officially? Can't they make it the White Bull? And then B, they're the sister team. But then B, why is Pierre not where we thought Pierre would be this year? He's not even where he was last year. No. And so I'm very confused by the Pierre Gasly saga. And, not just spinning Lance today, not just running into Lando last week. But what's going on, man?
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's just not adapting to the new cars. I mean, they're saying that they're a completely different beast to drive this year, so almost everyone gets a blank slate. Now, that's not true because the talent is always going to rise to the top, right? So the better drivers are probably going to react quicker and adapt quicker, but maybe Gasly's just not, I don't know, just not feeling it yet. But, I mean, I almost had him in my fantasy team because he was almost like one of those lower level drivers that was going to guarantee you to get some points. I'm glad I kind of dodged that bullet because he's just sucked this year.
Yeah, no, it is. He's honestly, he's becoming irrelevant in the grid, at least in the races so far, and it's a bummer. By lap 38, we started seeing people pitting on different strategies. When we started the race, everyone said it was a 2-stopper, and the rumor was Checo was going to be on a 1-stopper early. Well, that was all fake. It was a 3-stopper for everybody. I don't know if anyone knew that going in. Valtteri was the highest finishing 2-stopper, if I have my facts right. So at this point, at lap 38, we've had an amazing race. The pit strategy is starting to matter. And I wrote, this is the best Spanish GP in a while. And I sent Rob some more texts knowing he wasn't going to see him, and it pissed me off.
Yeah, that's true. And I was kind of trying to read your text afterwards then and thread it into exactly where you were in the race, where you were kind of like watching it. It was quite funny. But, yeah, and then it kind of does what all races kind of tend to do, is like we have that, 2/3 distance where everything kind of just sort of settles down for a while, where everyone's kind of like taking a breath and deciding what's going to happen. And I think like the only thing that we saw was we had K-Mag on Alex for last?
Yeah.
Last position. And that was it. No one else in the entire lineup was in DRS zone. All of a sudden the race seemed to like get perfectly spread out, where everybody was equidistant apart, but across the entire track. It was kind of quite bizarre. But even then, it didn't like lose its. Well, it lost its excitement in terms of passing, but it was still, it was still a good race. But I don't know. I just then it builds up to the part where I wasn't happy today, Brian.
Me either.
Yeah.
This is exactly the point where the sour taste in the mouth occurs. And so what happens is on lap 49, they tell Checo he has to let Max pass. And if I'm Checo, I'm pulling out my laptop and playing this sound. No. He says that is unfair. Unfair? It's so much more than unfair. It's the 6th race of the year. And I recognize there are a lot of people who also say, Max is aiming for the world championship, and if you finish 1-2, what's the difference for the constructors? Checo should have known this when he signed up, blah, blah, blah. It's the 6th race of the year. We don't know that Max will be going for the title. Checo earned his position at that point. It was unfair. It's incredibly early for team orders. And then for Christian Horner to sit there and say they're on different strategies. Oh, man, that's the biggest whopper of a lie I've ever heard in my life. Yeah, they were on different pit timings. But I'll just say this. Checo lets Max by. Checo takes an unneeded and unplanned pit stop for fresh tires, I think so they could guarantee the fastest lap. I think also, most importantly, so they could give it to Checo, let him have that point. And he takes an extra pit stop that had not been planned, and he still finishes only 13 seconds behind Max. 13 seconds is far less than a pit stop. Yeah. Checo had this race won. He let him by.
If there were 6, instead of being 6 races in, if there are only 6 races left and Checo's out of the standings and Max is going for the title, I get it. But this is just... And I know it's a team sport, and I know there's a number 1 and a number 2 driver, but I'm with you, Brian. It's just like, at this point in the season, Checo's got the win. He's got the pace. He doesn't need to let Max pass. That was Checo's win all day. I didn't like that. I really didn't like it. It's too early to be calling that. At this stage of the season, it's just... You've got to let your team... I know Red Bull don't want the two of them running into each other and taking each other out. Okay, I kind of get that. But at the end of the day, they are still 2 racing drivers that want to race. So until you get to a point where one of them is mathematically out or ridiculously far out, even if not mathematically, then you have 2 drivers that are both there to try and win the Drivers' Championship. And I didn't like that.
I'm a big Checo fan. And I do get the team orders, like the goal of it. And it is Red Bull again with their multi-21. They didn't call it that this time. They just called it team orders. But it was multi-21, and somewhere Mark Webber was watching this race with a twitch when that happened. But I'm watching this, and as a Checo fan, it just blows my mind. You have to think, right? Every racing driver, the reason I think a lot of people are getting into Formula One is they're approachable people. They're not 7 feet tall basketball players. They're not 400-pound muscular NFL players. Yes, they have big necks because of what their workouts, but otherwise, they're normal-looking people. And so when it's a reminder that in 2020, Checo didn't have a ride at the end of the year. He wins in Bahrain, and he's sitting on the podium, his first ever victory, crying because he doesn't have a ride for next year. He gets the ride at Red Bull. He gets one more win, I think only one, right? Last year, Azerbaijan, when Max had the blowout and then Lewis had the brake magic. And he just had a kid. I mean, this guy is sitting there, and he doesn't have a contract. They just entered contract negotiations for next year. And I think in his mind, he's not in a position of power to tell him to go take a leap. And he's going to follow what they say. And it bums me out. And I just think it's early. I get it. Like, trust me, I get why Red Bull does this. Everything favors Max. They want to win the Drivers' Championship again. I get it. I'm not stupid. It just feels very early, and it felt a little wrong. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm off the soapbox, I promise.
No, I'm on that soapbox with you. And then we kind of got to the tail end of the race, like last kind of like 7 or 8 laps, and it just became a war of attrition at this point. We had Valtteri struggling with tyres that maybe not making it to the end. We had, Lewis. We've got to mention Lewis, right? So Lewis has had that early first lap tag with K-Mag and pitted and basically been at the back of the grid in essentially what people are saying is one of the worst Mercedes since the dinosaurs. And he'd fought his way all the way back up into third or wherever he was. I mean, there wasn't a safety car that came out that allowed him to take a free pit stop and work his way back all the way back up through the grid. He was legitimately up at the front. And then all of a sudden, George and Lewis get the call that, guys, you might want to kind of slow down a lot. Otherwise, you're going to be in DNF type territory. And you could hear it in, I didn't catch whoever it was that was talking to Lewis on his team radio. I know you will because you love it, Brian. But you could hear it in his voice. He's like, basically, he knew there was probably going to be some backlash coming back from Lewis. Like, what the hell? I need to keep going. He's like, this is DNF. If you have, what was it? If you have to give up the place, then do it because it's not worth fighting because otherwise it's going to be a DNF. So they'd obviously seen something on the telemetry that basically said, this car is about to let go. You've got to just basically freewheel home now.
They said they had some leaks, some water leaks and other things in the engine. Also, then I read a lot about fuel being low and them worrying about not having enough for a sample. So I am a Lewis fanboy. But I recognize they're in the heat of the moment, something we did not talk about after that K-Mag incident on lap 1, turn 2. They get him in the pits. They send him back out. Lewis basically said, if you want to save the engine, I'm okay. Like he said on team radio, and I know it's in the heat of the moment, so I discount that a little. But he basically was ready to throw in the towel, like, it's okay if we retire and I grab an early shower and I get on a plane out of here. And then he finishes, he actually made it up to 4th, not 3rd. He made it up to 4th, at least at the end of the race, right behind George and the Red Bulls. And so then he did lose the place to Carlos because of the lifting and coasting. But, man, like, can you imagine how far Lewis has come where he's been out in early qualies? He's finished 13th, 14th, and 15th at some of these races in those areas. He's got to just be so demoralized for him to then have this happen on lap 1, even with the new upgrades in the package and a good practice. All those things, he still says, if you want to retire the car, I'm cool with it and save the engine. That is not the Lewis Hamilton of last year or in any year prior. And so just another good reminder that drivers are humans. And so he's been down, and it's weighing on him. And I don't think Lewis Hamilton of 2021 or prior would ever have said that message, but he did, and it kind of bummed me out to hear that the fight in him was kind of, he's like, yeah, all right. That's not the Lewis Hamilton I cheer for. And I'm not knocking him. I get where he's been. But it was a bummer to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was kind of it then, really. Once the Mercedes drama had kind of played out, we get the Red Bull coming home 1-2. George takes a phenomenal third. And now he's only driver to have finished in the top 5 in every race, I think, is the stat. Come on, you must know this SAP stats.
That
I think
sounds
George,
about right.
George
I wasn't prepared for that one.
No, well, I like to throw these things on you. So yeah, I mean, and that kind of just like wrapped up the Spanish Grand Prix, and I kind of sat back and I thought, yeah, I've enjoyed that. That hasn't been a procession from the first corner. That's thrown up a lot of sub-stories. No safety car that intervened or did anything crazy, but even without that, yeah, solid race, lots of overtakes, some great overtakes around the outside, some DRS action. Like, yep, sign me up for Spain again next year. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yeah, Merck is back, right? Maybe not necessarily challenging for the win, but at least in the mix with the top teams, with Ferrari and Red Bull.
Enough to make a nuisance. Enough to make a nuisance of themselves.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Which will mean that
Enough to make the top of the grid even more
Yeah.
exciting than it was
Yeah.
before. Like this season is fantastic. Couldn't be more excited. Still bummed about Pierre. I'm trying to figure that one out. The team orders at Red Bull really honked me off, but I'll get over it. I'm a big boy. Just give me like 3 or 4 hours, and I'll walk around in the yard and kick some dirt. And then here's my other question: Tonsillitis boy Lando did all right. Given everything that happened, he ends up finishing 8th. Danny Rick was 12th, and he finished right ahead of Pierre. I got to vote for Danny Rick and Pierre as the most irrelevant top team, or mid-tier team driver so far. I don't understand what in the world is happening. It's like, at first I wrote McLaren is irrelevant, but that's wrong because Lando keeps poking his nose into places every now and then.
Yeah.
It's Danny Rick, and I don't get it. If you take his Monza win out from last year, it's been a lost McLaren experience for Danny Rick at this point.
It has, and it was a bit of a kind of polar opposites. There was the big McLaren fanfare that Danny Rick now was going to become the most the Australian with the most race starts in Formula One. I think by starting today he surpassed Mark Webber in terms of the Australian with the most F1 races. But you're like, yeah, but that almost highlights even more the kind of the what could have been. I mean, Danny Rick just feels like one of those drivers, and again, don't know the guy, never been an F1 driver, so can't really commentate on this, but from the outside looking in, nice guy that doesn't seem to quite have that killer instinct fire in the belly that all of the teammates, when he was with Seb, you knew Seb was always going to have the ride over him. Now he's getting outdone by Lando, and it's just like, yeah, you do a great social media presence, you take a great picture on Instagram, but you're actually paid to drive that car that you're in. And I love Danny Rick, I really do, but there just feels like that's it. I don't see him ever winning a title. I don't see him being given a drive that's capable of winning a title now.
Not anymore.
It just feels a little bit sad that there's obviously an immensely talented driver in there that is just kind of just ebbing and flowing away into retirement.
Yeah. Aussie friend Mark has now hung up the podcast and is sending you a box of feces.
Oh yeah, I mean he's never listening to us again. But I mean, I
You're
love
not
him,
wrong.
and I just wish he could have converted some of that promise into results. And maybe he got the rough end of the deal at Red Bull being the number 2 to Seb. But
well, with Max, because then Max was there and they crashed in Monaco
Yep.
famously. And then he learned it was all for Max, and he's searched for a number 1 ride at a top team ever since. By the way, that's our second Mark Webber reference today, and he is the best number 2 driver.
Fantastic, guys. Not bad for a number 2 driver. Cheers.
I always have that Mark Webber ready to go. Yeah, so that concludes the race, and then we get into fantasy, as Rob said. And, boy, tale of 2 cities. One city being Chicago, and we dominated, and the other city being somewhere in Connecticut, and boy, they sucked. And did I say that nicely enough? All right. So if we look at the week that was Spain, shout out 217 points in our league. Kelly Marie S. winging it, took it home. Nice job. Second place was a tie, and I'm gonna mess these up. So Antonis A. Red Bullinho, we've mentioned you before, Antonis. Nice work. 207. And then Tomas H. Nazrak Nademnik. I don't know what I just said, but tied for second. And then we had a tie for fourth. Nutcracker Wannabes, 200 points, Eal S. And then a fella named Brian S., Team Sap, tied for fourth. I will say this about my fantasy team really quick. I even texted this to Rob. I had a brainstorm Friday night going into Saturday that I was going to do a whole different thing, and I built a giant model that takes into account many factors. I actually have to use Solver in Excel to run it, and I used none of it when I put my team in. But I did, thankfully, ditch Ferrari as my constructor for Red Bull, and in order to make that happen, I had to ditch George for Carlos. And Carlos, because of that place he got back from Lewis, at the end, when they had to lift and coast, he only finished 1 spot behind George. So at first, it looked like a horrible move by me, but it ended up working out. And it is exciting as the season goes. That was the week of Spain. But as we look at the season now, first place, Antonis A. Red Bullini, who I just mentioned. Myself in second. Vance J. There we go. Team 1, well named, in third. Tomas H. with the name I can't do. And then fifth place as of now is Edward Jason S. Gunnar Stroud. So a lot of teams right behind that pack. Abby and Mark Dela and others. Rob V, you're in ninth. Not too bad, buddy. After the week that was. So yeah, I beat Rob this week. Your team didn't work out for you.
The moment Charles, turbo driver Charles coasting out, I was like, oh well.
Yeah, but I had turbo driver Charles too, and I finished 200 points. You had 107. I'm just saying.
But I don't understand. So where did all these come from? Because you just spent most of the episode talking about how all your drivers crashed and burned. You didn't have anybody left. So where
Red
the hell
Bull
did you
was
get
my constructor. It's called diversification. You had all your eggs in the Ferrari basket. It didn't work out for you.
Fair enough.
I'd like to see your portfolio. Is it all Enron stock?
I don't know what that means.
Really?
It's something to do with money. I don't know, some nerdy stuff. It's probably to do with tires as well.
For anyone who was in America in 1999, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, I wasn't. I was in, the Great Britain. Okay, right. So that's fantasy. Well done, Brian. You're amazing. It's all good.
It sounded so sincere.
That was the most sincere I will ever be.
I didn't even sing a song, but all right, move on.
Well, I was going to say, before we move on to our Monaco preview, we've given our 10 pence and 10 cents, respectively, as to what we thought about Spain. But somebody we haven't heard from yet that might want to give their view on Spain. So I think it might be time to listen to what Pit Lane Paul made of all of it.
Hey guys, just at the airport, finished Barcelona race. What a was actually a good one. I thought reasonably. But back to the main bits. Managed to get to the airport. The traffic around the circuit was ridiculous. Like every Grand Prix so far, it is super popular. So it was a bit of a race to be able to get to the plane. Luckily, it's got a 2-hour delay, so there we go. A couple of beers, and then remember I've got to drive. These things happen. Moving on, Grand Prix. What can we say about that? So it's sort of like Mercedes sort of looked like they're back a little bit. The car's definitely a little bit better. I think that the work they've done, the upgrades they've done are fantastic. So let's be completely honest, it's positive for them. They're not in a position to be winning races, but the fact that they were competing, yeah, it looks good for them. Carlos Sainz goes through his usual ritual of seemingly throwing the car off the track for bizarre reasons. And then the painful one for Charles Leclerc, which, if this is a Ferrari thing. We had an issue with Ferrari engine on a Friday with Valtteri, and we also had some technical issue, which I don't know if it's an engine-related one with Zhou earlier on. But the long and short of it is they need to sort out these little issues. If they are seriously going to go for championships, they need to sort these little issues out. Max had a similar issue, but, at the end of the day, the timesheets don't lie, and he's won that race by a considerable margin while being in the gravel trap, which is kudos to the way that he drives. Perez brought home a strong second. George Russell, he's impressing. He's doing a great job in the car, and he's wrestling the car to good positions, and he's getting out of it what Lewis can't. But that said, Lewis Hamilton, first lap puncture, he drove a superb race. He was sort of the Lewis of old, fighting through the field, and yeah, you've got to give credit where it is due. He just ran out of tyres at the end, and the cooling issues they had with their car. But all in all, it was good. It was good. It was actually an exciting race. It was good to watch. For me, no real big surprises. Just Ferrari throwing it away again. From personal side with Valtteri, yeah, great. We gambled on the strategy. We had nothing to lose really. If we box, then we're going to get out of the race as 6th place. If we don't box, we're probably going to finish 6th place because the guys will overtake us on fresh tyres. But it's a gamble that you can take. It can backfire, but it's a gamble you can take. So no issues from our side, and we move on to what will be the boring race of the year, and that is Monte Carlo, where I'll try and get as excited as I can next Sunday night when we do this chat. If the truth be told, you're going to be panning for some sort of anything from me. So Spain, let's be honest with you, everyone knows Spain. It's Spain. It's got some interesting facts. The highest Spanish mountain, for instance, is not in Spain. It's nowhere near Spain. It's a long, long way away from Spain. So Spain boasts their highest mountain, but not in Spain. So basically, like saying that the highest mountain in America is going to be in, let's say, Russia. Probably not the best choice of countries, but let's go with Russia. You know, you can sort of say you're not far away from it in some ways, but same with Spain. The first modern novel is Spanish. So I'm not a churchgoer, but I always thought the Bible was the first novel, if you can call it a novel. And I don't think Jesus spoke good Spanish. Who knows? Who am I to judge these things? And also, if it weren't for Spanish, we wouldn't have chocolate. I thought that one an unusual one. But there we go. That's Spain pretty much wrapped up. It's a country I've been to many a time. It's a lovely place. If you like paella, sharing food with your friends when you just want a steak yourself. And they have bullfighting, which I widely despise. Apart from that, yeah, we move on to Monaco. Yeah, see you there.
Paul, thank you.
I just want to know how many beers Paul had at the airport waiting for his delayed flight there, because I'm going to say he maybe went off a little bit of a tangent towards the end of that there. I actually had to... Do you know where he's on about for the largest mountain in Spain?
So I did find it while I was in between dance shows, and I've since forgotten because I started drinking when I got home. Do you know?
Yes, it's in one of the Canary Islands, which is claimed to be Spanish. It's Tenerife, which is an island like quite a long way away from Spain. But it's a Spanish island. But I get what he's on about. I just don't quite get why it needed to come up on today's review of the Spanish Grand Prix.
Why
but
would
that's
it
why.
not?
That's why we love Pit Lane Paul. You know, he gives us the insight to things that you wouldn't even realize you didn't know.
Rob, as I said, this is the best episode we've ever done. I
Yeah,
love
we
it. Paul,
might-
thank you. Wait, thank you. Paul, seriously, that was brilliant. Keep them coming. Like, you can't get this type of information on any other podcast in America or the world. Seriously. Like, I mean, an insider and then his perspective of, you know, the geographic landscape of the areas we're talking about. I love it. But we are going to Monaco next, as Paul said. So, Rob, tell us a little bit about what we should expect heading there.
So, let's be honest, we're going to head probably into the biggest hypocritical moment of the entire F1 calendar next week, because everybody is going to be lauding the opulence and the money and the celebrities and the glamour and the glitz that is Monaco. And I do. I love Monaco. I look out for it on the calendar. I know Paul, from being there, says it's one of the worst Grand Prix to actually be at in terms of the pit lane space and just the overall kind of experience of being there. But from a non F1 person watching it, I love it. But the hypocrisy for me is it's going to be glamour and glitz at the same level that Miami got trashed for a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, let's not go back over that. But it's been there since 1929. It's a procession. It really is. I mean, we're probably guaranteed multiple safety cars, with most of the overtakes being done in the pits, or maybe a couple of dives, late dives up the inside in the chicane after the tunnel. But we're probably going to spend most of our time looking out for money, yachts, and celebrities on the grid. But I actually don't mind admitting that I don't care. I love it. I love the Monaco Grand Prix.
I do too. We do have some good stats about it, and now that we've left Spain, I feel okay bringing back the Spanish type band. It's obviously Mexican mariachi, but let's do it for some SAP Stats Monaco edition. Here it is. SAP Stats Monaco edition coming at you. All right. It's always been part of the Triple Crown that includes the Indy 500 and Le Mans. Graham Hill is the only winner of the Indy 500, Monaco GP, and Le Mans 24 Hours. Two of the three have been won by Juan Pablo Montoya and Fernando Alonso. But Monaco itself, the great Senna has won it 6 times. Schumacher and Graham Hill 5 times. Alain Prost 4. And then there's a mess of folks behind him with 3. But of the current drivers, Hamilton is one of those with 3 Monaco wins. Fernando has 2. Sebastian 2. Danny Rick 1, where he famously swam in the pool. And then Max with 1. One of my favorite races and my favorite notes from, and I probably didn't know this if I'm being totally honest till maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I never appreciated that in 1996, only 3 drivers actually finished the race. There's some debate amongst nerds if retiring in the pits on the last lap counts as a finish, and some people say 4 finished. I call that BS. The car has to go across the line. There were 3. The winner was Olivier Panis, who famously had a turn in Top Gear in their ice racing edition, but it was his only Formula One win for Ligier. Second place went to David Coulthard in a McLaren, and then Johnny Herbert, who we watch on Sky Sports, was the last finisher, third in a Sauber. Now, I've said that Monaco is a procession. Rob just gave us examples of Monaco being a procession, talked about it. Paul has said it before, but you say, well, Brian, bust out the SAP stats. So
Brian,
if you
Brian, bust out the SAP stats.
Yeah, I'm about to, baby. If you start first, of all the races that have been run there, 30 times you're going to finish the race first as well. So qualifying first on pole, 30 times that means you're going to win. If you start second on the grid, 16 times you're going to win the race. So basically, starting first or second, 69% of all races have been won from first or second. That's a lot. But if you add in third, the third position on the grid, 11 wins have come from third, which now makes it 85% of the races at the Monaco GP have been won from first, second, or third. And then it dips tremendously, easy for me to say. 3 wins from fourth, 4 wins from fifth, and then outside of fifth, only 3 times have people won from there. 8th, 9th, and 14th. So it is just a humongous procession. The data backs it up. So watch quali, and whoever finishes in the top 3, they have a chance. But in reality, it's likely first or second are the chances. And it's going to have to be a pass, which will be fun to see. My last note on Monaco is I often play this sound.
What has happened?
And that comes from a year or 2 ago. I guess it was a year ago because they didn't have Monaco in 2020. So a year ago, it was a procession. There were no red flags. It was a boring race. And there was maybe one solid real overtake, and it was coming out of the pits. It was Lewis and Seb and I forgot who else. And as they're trying to watch it on the feed, they cut to a picture of Lance Stroll. And it's his promo shot of his arms crossed, smiling, and they show him. And then they cut to him going over a chicane, over a curb. And David Croft is beside himself. Well, we need to see that again. What happened? We need to know what happened. And then they start to show it again on a replay, and they cut away again for another replay of something else. And then he yells, what has happened? And the reason I highlight this, the reason this is actually important, the Principality provides their own television direction crew. I did not know that. And so it is not the normal F1 team that does a lot of the races and travels around. Monaco provides their own television direction. So if you watch the race, and if it is a little boring, and if you miss some of the action, just know it's going to be a procession, and it's going to be given to you by the people who host it. Just a unique fact.
I love your facts, Brian, and I'm going to finish on one last fact for me, which is that as much as all these highly paid aerodynamic people like to claim that they've got these top efficient cars that in theory could run on the roof of a tunnel according to the amount of downforce they generate, let's just remember that back in the day, Herbie went to Monte Carlo and he won the race by driving on the roof of that tunnel. So if a Volkswagen Beetle can go on the roof of that tunnel, I'm not sure it's that an impressive claim by the F1 teams. They've got enough downforce to do it. So just saying.
I mean, I fully anticipate someone giving it a try.
That would be awesome, especially if it was Herbie. Anyway, but so it's time for another round of 100 seconds of DRS, and I've had to put up with a lot of Brian's locals or friends coming on, but today we've got somebody joining in the 100 seconds of DRS who lives in the same town as me, essentially, so it's great to say hello to another Connecticut soul here, and welcome Ben to 100 seconds of DRS.
Yeah, pleasure. Long time, first time, gentlemen. Just happy to be part of the segment, and hopefully I make it through the whole DRS zone unscathed.
You'll do great, Ben. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we were talking about this a little bit as we were kind of getting to know you, but kind of explain a little bit of your F1 journey. When did you get into it, and kind of how did it stick for you?
Yeah, my dad was a big petrol head. He basically, as a child, grew up like 2 miles from Lime Rock. So far as a kid, I'd always be going to races and watching F1 early on Sundays. And I just remember, even as a wee child, just the luxuriant flaxen locks of Alain Prost, shimmering in the Monaco sun.
So
That's awesome.
you've got the you're old school. I mean, like you referenced in there, you've been loving this sport since the 80s, which especially for someone in this country is like absolutely amazing. That must have taken some real dedication to be able to like carry on keeping in touch with it, because coverage hasn't exactly been great over here, right?
No, it's always been a little bit niche, a little obscure. Like, I was kind of that weird guy in high school who liked F1 and kind of always had to explain what it meant. But, to see it kind of taking life and grabbing hold here is really gratifying. Better late than never, right?
I'm still hopeful that we can get away from the 8 a.m. races on ESPN where it's the Sky Sports coverage. And as soon as the race is done, they show the podium, and then it's Nicole Briscoe who pops on and she goes, "And this is brought to you by Mother's Polish. Goodbye." And then it's like immediately into like a rerun of last week's Sports Center. That still hurts. We'll get there one day.
An awkward dismount for sure.
Exactly. So in addition to unfortunately living near Rob, but obviously being a fan of F1 like we are, in my mind, the pinnacle of F1 fandom is a chance to do 100 seconds of DRS, and here it is. Ben, are you ready for this amazing opportunity?
100%, for sure.
Well, now, if you're ready, the question is, are we? Because usually we aren't. Rob, are you ready?
Well, I am, and now we've done this recently, and I'm 2 for 2 on timing the 100 seconds correctly. So I've got to ask you, because you haven't got the great track record here, are you ready to time us?
No, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I will do the best I can, because that's all you can ask out of people. So I'm ready. I'm going to count you guys in. Rob's going to do the questions. Ben is ready. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, start.
Favorite F1 track?
Hungaroring.
Mario or Luigi?
I have a Mario build, but I'm a Luigi inside.
If you were in the pit crew, which tyre would you change?
Right front.
Is hot dog a sandwich?
No.
Favorite livery on an F1 car of all time?
Shadow UOP from the early 70s.
Ooh, wow. Old school. Favorite musician or musical group?
Ween.
Favorite non-motorsport sport?
Curling.
Oh, wow.
First memory of F1?
Alain Prost's sweet, sweet fro. This was Carl Bombs.
Do you have any lucky superstitions?
No.
Tyres, interesting or not interesting?
Interesting.
What's your favourite cheese? Oh, sorry, I thought you answered then. What's your favourite cheese?
Brie.
Which 2 drivers from different eras would you love to see head-to-head?
Senna and Clark.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, nice. Would you rather be chased by 1 horse-sized duck or 10 duck-sized horses?
10 duck-sized horses.
What's best, a wet or a dry race?
Wet.
What is it that you enjoy the most about F1?
People.
Ooh, cool. What's your least favourite errand to run?
Laundry. I'll count that as an errand. Laundry.
If you could add a venue to the F1 calendar, where would it be?
Watkins Glen.
Oh, yeah.
What's the best thing to do on a rainy day?
Read?
There's a question mark at the end of that one.
I don't know.
Sleep in or get up early?
Get up early.
And that's time. That is time.
Nice.
By the way,
curling. Wow.
Well, so curling, are you an active curler?
I am a curler. I curl. We have 2 dedicated clubs here in Connecticut. I curl up in Norfolk. So maybe I'm just like into niche stuff. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
No. This is the coolest thing. I've always wanted to go curling, like more than you know. And there's a curling club in my town, and I've tried to bring my buddies along, and they won't let us in because you have to like become a member, and it's insanely expensive. I think they looked at us and said, "We don't want this riffraff in here." But I really desperately want to go curling. So if I ever come up to see Rob, can we go, Ben?
1,000%. Yes.
So do you? Because I know nothing about curling other than watching it on the TV and thinking it looks absolutely insanely fun. But do do you get to go through all the pieces, or are you like a dedicated stone thrower, or are you the one with the broom, or are you the other one that just kind of shouts instructions? How does that work?
3 out of the 4 people sweep and throw stones, and then the skip throws the stones and does the yelling. So pretty much everyone gets a chance to do everything.
I always thought it looks funny because don't you wear like one shoe that's grippy and one shoe that slides or something?
Totally right. Yeah, you have a piece of Teflon under your, under the foot, which is not your non-dominant hand. Anyways, yeah, it can be very slippery, but it's very simple. It starts and ends with a handshake, and the winner's always by losers of round, which is kind of
Nice.
cool. Yeah.
Wow.
Very cool. Yeah, this was amazing. And so, sorry, one last thing I would say. Great matchup, Clark and Senna. You'd love to see those two go. I would too. That would be brilliant. I don't know if those are the two I would have chosen off the top of my head, but man, I'd pay to see that. I would love to see that. I wish someone could simulate it somehow.
And you're the first person to. Oh, sorry, Ben. You're the first person to answer that question because I only added it to the 100 seconds of DRS list this morning. So.
I can't do my practice, so.
But yeah, I mean, thanks so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate it. And for all the listeners, the hundreds, the thousands of listeners out there, then you want to do what Ben did. It's real easy. You can just hit us up at Twitter at Dirtyside, at F1 Dirtyside, right, Brian?
Yeah, you got it on the third try.
I got it on the third try. Or we did have a couple of people reach out and said they don't do Twitter. So if you don't do Twitter, then we've got a Facebook page you can message us through. And we've also got dirtysideofthetrack@gmail.com if you want to just do an email. Don't find the lack of Twitter as a way not to come on DRS. Just find one of those 3 ways and we will slot you in. So yeah, pleasure to meet you, Ben. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Ben. This was amazing.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks so much for participating, Ben. That was awesome. It's now time to kind of think about next week. We talked about Monaco. We had the 100 seconds. If you're interested in participating, as we just said, please let us know at F1 Dirty Side. Every week, kind of ask you guys to be your best out there. Be nice, be kind, be safe. Thanks for being part of the Dirty Side. I would actually tell you that this was our best episode, and the next one will do even better. So tell your friends to listen along with us.
And more than tell your friends to listen along with us, for anybody that happens to live in the Connecticut area, especially kind of in the Avon area, then we've got a local bar in Unionville, the Iron Horse, that is going to be opening up and showing the Monaco Grand Prix on Sunday morning. So if anybody wants to get along and come and hang out with me so that it's not just me on my own watching Formula One in the bar, that would be absolutely superb. We're going to see if we can also maybe do a couple of sound bites, a couple of interviews as we're watching the Grand Prix, maybe have some breakfast together and just hang out. So if you can get along to the Iron Horse Sports Bar in Unionville on Sunday morning, that will be absolutely fantastic. And it'd be great to try and hang out with some dirty-siders in real life. And yes, Ben, I am talking about you because I know you live locally, so you're at least one person that means that I won't be sitting in the bar by myself.
I wish I could be there. It sounds brilliant.
It might be brilliant. We'll see how it goes, Brian.
It'll be great. I will also be watching it outside of my home, but not nearly as fun. My wife and I are going to Coldplay the night before here in Chicago, which will be fantastic. But I'll likely be in the hotel lobby. I don't even know where I'm staying, by myself, asking for a room service delivery to an empty bar. But I'll figure it out.
And on that final note, then thanks for listening, and look forward to you listening next week.
Talk soon, everyone. Bye.